Today's guest is the CEO and co-founder of Skale Labs, a college athlete turned tech entrepreneur turned blockchain developer. Jack O'Holleran has now landed himself at the forefront of the blockchain space, solving crypto's most challenging scalability issues. So please welcome Jack to the show. Thanks for being here, man.
Hey, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I got to tell you, man, from the very beginning, I've got a slight bone to pick, not necessarily with you, but I'm a huge Gator fan. I grew up in Gainesville and in like 96, Nebraska rolled Lawrence Phillips out of jail to come play against us, and you guys whooped us in the national championship game. So I have this like sort of PTSD about anyone who played for the Cornhuskers or for any Nebraska fan.
Yeah. So, hey, sorry. That's, by the way, fun. It's fun to get to talk a little college football on the crypto talk. So I like that.
We can do plenty.
Yeah. Hey, that was, you guys got your licks in on us in other years and in other sports. So but we had a good one that day though. I remember that. I was a kid watching it and,
yeah, I think it was my freshman year. That was like my freshman year of college, and we were so hopeful, and it went so poorly for us. But interesting. So you were a wide receiver at Nebraska, right?
Yep, that is right.
So I have to assume every time I talk to anyone who's been involved in sports and ends up in tech or a CEO of a company, that there were like major lessons that they learned, whether it was about work ethic or team building from playing sports. Have you found that that's the case for you? Things that you learned from playing sports your whole life that have led you to where you are?
Yeah, definitely. I think in a couple categories too. I think one is just learning how to get good at a skill. So you play sports, and I was always the type of athlete where I'd be kind of average initially, and then I figured out like what I needed to get really good at. And then I would put effort into getting good at those things. And then, then you get compounding interest on your effort, and then you can really pull away from the pack. So, I was all state in 3 different sports, but a lot of it was just based off really like studying and understanding what I needed to get good at and even training in particular ways. So that was like one thing I think that's really valuable. And if you think about business, you think about building companies, you think about, anything in life, it's really like analyzing what is going to produce the most return on your effort and then focusing on those things. So that was critical. And then also there's just like, hey, like, especially being a college athlete, it's just insanely hard work. It's harder than starting a company and being, an entrepreneur. I mean, that's hard too, but man, to play college football and Nebraska, we're just beating the crap out of each other every day. And, it was tough.
A few times a day, I would imagine. It's actually interesting. Yeah. Watching these programs try to return in the context of COVID and try to find a way to do all of that hard work while keeping their players healthy. I can't even imagine what it would be like to be on one of these teams now.
Yeah. My heart goes out to these guys that work so hard and you train so hard, and like the women and men playing college sports who, this is their one chance. And thankfully the NCAA granted a lot of them an extra year of eligibility, but right. I mean, I hope they get on the field this year, right? It's crazy stuff.
So tell me about your path, I guess, from post-college to becoming, the CEO and founding Skale. How did you progress to that point?
Yeah. So, it's kind of interesting because I was not technical when I was in college. I think a lot of my friends were like, "You're doing what?"
Mine too.
But one of the things that's interesting about technology, though, it's just kind of like going back to that sports analogy. There's a certain set of things to learn and to understand, and it's like learning a new language. If you want to learn Spanish or Japanese or something, you have to like understand the framework, understand like what you need to get good at and practice, and then technology is very clear. There's a very defined set of rules. It's not magic. But you can't jump in the deep end. You have to start at like a learning, a basic area. And I have to say, I was very fortunate. I grew up in Nebraska in a small town, but I had 2 uncles, 2 of my dad's brothers had moved to the Bay Area and were both surgeons, and they're doctors in the Bay Area. And through their relationships, they said, "Hey, you should meet some of these people. Maybe you should move to Silicon Valley and work at a tech company." And I was thinking to myself, like, me work at a tech company? I like want to throw my computer out the window and I don't understand what's working. And so, ended up like getting a job at a company called Good Technology. And you know what? I went to school and I decided, hey, I started in sales, and I decided I don't want to just be good at learning the techniques and mechanics of sales. I want to learn about the technology. Like, how is it working? Like, what are the principles of what makes this work? And I started first just understanding what it did. And then you start getting into like the technical frameworks and then the coding language, and eventually, started my own enterprise software company, became a founder after we had an exit to Motorola for almost $500 million. It was a successful exit. And
sounds that way.
Yeah. And we raised a lot of capital too.
Nice round number. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we raised $250 million also. So it was like, would have been way better to have that type of exit and raise 10 million, but it was still a win, and a great win for everybody involved. But I decided, hey, I want to go start my own company, and then had. At this point, and the first one was a digital currency platform where NASA and other companies could use this internal currency, like these NASA bucks, to buy resources internally. And so I got really into digital currencies and doing this. But one thing that happened was I realized we had about 10 people, and I was like, well, I'm the only person that doesn't know how to code. And, here I am, like, used to be a football player, used to like running my head into other people and, doing squats and bench presses, and not necessarily like sitting in front of a keyboard and like learning technical framework. So I was in Japan for work. We had businesses in Japan. I spent 500 days in Japan, and I was there on one of my trips, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to like look online and see if I can teach myself. And I just taught myself how to code. Awesome. And it made me such a better teammate and value add player to that startup that I had started, Octana, because all of a sudden I could have different level conversations with my team and help really guide the product roadmap and product strategy.
It's interesting. I spent almost 6 months in Japan. You probably don't know my background, but I was a DJ for about 20 years. And I was the DJ in the band for like the Michael Jackson of Japan, basically. So I was like a band member, and we toured all of Japan. So I spent 6 months there, which to me was an extremely culturally eye-opening experience, especially seeing, kind of every corner of that country. Did you have that same sort of feeling spending that much time in Japan? Especially, I'm from Gainesville, Florida. You're from Nebraska. It's not exactly like moving over from the big city.
Yeah, that is one of the cool things about Japan, is that it's so culturally different. And you go to a lot of countries around the world, and everyone's wearing the same clothes and kind of like watching the same television and having similar cultural norms and customs. And in Japan, it's very different. And there's such like reverence people have for each other and space and process. And it was amazing. I learned Japanese over the time. I was going there for 7 years, and I went over 50 times, and I loved it. I had a blast.
Yeah, I love it over there. I was definitely shocked the first time. I was like in a crowded nightclub, and I walked up to the bar to get a drink, and everybody looked at me like I was insane. And then I looked to the right, and there was this huge line for the bar, which is what you're talking about. Like, they're so orderly and respectful. You can't even, they thought I was like crazy for walking up to the bar to get a drink, which is, obviously is serving them well in the context of, I think, how things are now, when it's easy when people listen to the government and, keep their distance and wear masks and things like that. So it's an interesting cultural difference there. So you spent all this time in Japan, you started obviously multiple companies, you became a coder. Why cryptocurrency? Why Skale? What problems did you see that existed, and why did you decide that you were going to fix them?
Yeah. And by the way, when I say I became a coder, I learned how to, but I want to just say real quickly, like, that too is an art form and a master skill. And I know how it works, but I'm so fortunate to be paired up with some phenomenal engineers who, like Stan, my co-founder and CTO, and the whole team we have at Skale. It's incredibly helpful to know how to do it and be able to do it and understand frameworks. My strengths are really understanding product market fit, building a team, knowing how to execute, designing team structure, designing product marketing, and, building a plan to go like support customers and build a product. And thankfully I know how to code, so I'm able to participate and support, but this is a master skill. And in particular, what we're doing, this network serves developers, right? And so I have a lot of empathy for those users, and just want to give them props and credit because they're way better at that than I am.
You're not Mr. Robot. No,
yeah, exactly.
You're off the hook. For sure.
But hey, it was 2013. I was actually in Shanghai, and one of my buddies, who is one of the founders of CoinDesk, was saying, "You've got to buy Bitcoin, learn about Bitcoin." And I'd had the white paper passed around in 2011, and I was like, "Really, Bitcoin?" And I was there with a lot of other friends, and it was actually a friend's bachelor party, and so and a lot of tech people, and everyone was talking about Bitcoin, and so then kind of like went down the rabbit hole then. And then when Ethereum launched, I realized I was like, that was like another like eye-opening light bulb. And then when I was starting a new company in 2017, I was working on another machine learning AI SaaS product. The prior company had started Octana. Almost every biotech and pharmaceutical company in the world uses this. And if you've ever had a drug prescribed to you by a doctor in some way, shape, or form, Octana probably played a role in getting the doctor information for your prescription. And I was looking at that category again and realized, hey, there's so much opportunity in crypto to build something where we actually change the dynamics and the parameters of how systems work and how entities work. And if you look at Scale, guess what? It's open source. It's like Ethereum and Bitcoin. Like, nobody owns these things. We all participate. The code's open source. You have ownership over tokens by way of your key structures, and you can even vote with them, like in Scale, if we want to change economics. Well, I'm the CEO of Skale Labs. I have no control over the Skale Network. We have to vote. And if you have tokens staked in the network, and you know what? And when people pay for a Scale chain, it doesn't go to Skale Labs, doesn't go to anybody else working on the network. It goes to validators and delegators that are staking. And you can create these new business frameworks where you have more egalitarian and democratized business models. And it just destroys middleman float. So middlemen that are taking huge rakes really can't compete when communities are owning and running systems. So got excited about that, started working on Scale, actually started working on building a dApp, was introduced to Stan Kladko, our CTO. He was working on building a dApp, and he was actually working on building like 6 of them. And I was like, how can you build all these things? He's like, well, I've designed this architecture that does this and this and this. And I was like, draw this out for me. And then we put our heads together and we said, you know what? Let's build this for everyone else. Let's not build dApps. Let's support dApp developers, and let's build infrastructure and middleware. And that's what both of us had done in our career anyways. So it was a natural fit.
And so how does Scale do that in a unique way? What's the value proposition that you guys bring that nobody else is doing?
Yeah. So if you think about blockchains, right? And I'm gonna go.
You can do it for dummies.
Get more technical.
Yeah, you can start with blockchain for dummies, dApps for dummies, and go from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, not dummies. We'll just say like there's obviously many, many smart people that aren't engineers who understand the way crypto works. So I'm going to go for that angle of
that's me. I'm the dummy. Yeah, I'm the dummy.
Not at all, man. So we think of blockchains, right? They're really computers. We'll call them nodes, but these computers all have to just say the same thing. They carry the same database, right? And then they have unique mechanisms depending on the consensus for them to talk and say, hey, we all have the same state. And if you have the same thing, great, then guess what? We can process a transaction. A smart contract is another step than just a transaction. It also can include a piece of logic. Like, did the Bulls win? Okay, yes, they won. Well, then this happens too, right? You can incorporate data points. And that's what smart contracts do. And so what Scale does is most blockchains, the more nodes you add, the more secure they get. But the slower they get and the more expensive they get to run, because the bigger the history is in the data, the more complex it is, and the more it's just bloated and shared across everything. So when we think about regular applications, we think about, like, I'm using my Gmail. Guess what? Only Google has that data. We're using Zoom Meeting. Guess what? Zoom Meeting has servers. Only Zoom Meeting uses those servers.
Right.
But in blockchains, Zoom, if Zoom and Google ran on a shared blockchain, if Zoom started getting a lot of use, and like it has in the last couple of months, all of a sudden my email would get slower to use and more expensive.
Right.
And so what Scale does, Scale has this way where we can still have a big shared ledger called Ethereum, right? But then every application that's a decentralized application gets its own version of Ethereum. And so if I have an email, a decentralized email client, or a decentralized video client, I'm just using these as basic examples.
Of course.
And one's successful and the other's not, they have no impact on each other. They each have their own back-end database. And guess what? They don't have to pay per transaction over in that zone. They just pay for the compute resourcing. And so everyone gets the speed, efficiency, and high throughput, and they're not impacted by anyone else because they have their own zone, okay? And so that's what Skale does. But there's one more unique thing that happens there, because when you have a smaller set of nodes, it's easier to get 2/3 of them to collude to steal money.
Right.
And so Skale basically has a big shared network. And what it does is it randomly selects the computers or nodes and rotates them for each application. So you basically have this big pool, and at any given time, 16 of them are working for me, and then they're swapped out, and then they might be working for you tomorrow, and the next month they're working for someone else. And so to get them to collude to steal money is really difficult, because they
don't
all
even
have
know
this,
who they'll be working with on any given day.
Yeah, and if they're bad, they lose all their money, right? And so it's really hard in a real world environment to organize a collusion attack when you have a big pool and then use randomness, rotation, and incentives. And so that's really, this in simple terms as I can try to describe it.
Yeah.
The magic of what Skale does.
So what will be the effect of Ethereum 2.0 on your business?
So then we talk about this big shared chain. Well, that big shared chain is only going to be 64 versions. Right. So Ethereum has shards. There's 64 shards. Still, Zoom and Google, if they're both on Ethereum, share things and have shared price, and we're talking like hundreds of transactions across the network. And so what Skale does, Skale was designed with ETH2 in mind, and it was designed to support ETH2 and give people still their own backend. And they don't have to, their cost isn't impacted by other people. Their security is not impacted. It's still 2 lines of code. You can connect ETH2 to Skale, just like you can in ETH1. You will be able to in ETH2's around. So hey, the just basic transaction throughput issue will be less pronounced. Instead of 20 transactions per second, we might be getting hundreds.
Right.
But we think that we're going to need millions and millions of transactions a second to make all of these smart contract calls if we are going to really see growth in decentralized applications.
And how do we get there? Because obviously it's like, many people I guess don't realize, but Bitcoin and Ethereum are kind of like your grandpa's beat up old Cadillac at this point with the speed of some new blockchains that are coming out. It really is the older technology. So how do we get from, the 10, 20 transactions per second that we're talking about on Ethereum to, 10,000, 100,000, a million? How does that scaling happen?
Yeah. So if you think about each Skale chain, this is what Skale does. So Skale uses the mainnet. So the mainnet, anything that comes into Skale basically gets frozen on the mainnet, and then it produces a clone. And so let's say you have, 10 ETH in a certain dApp. And actually your 10 ETH don't go into Skale, they get frozen there in the mainnet. And then you produce these cloned or wrapped versions. And then you have these Skale ETH. Right. And then they run in Skale. And then when it goes to Skale in this application, that application can do 2,000 transactions per second. And the other one can do 2,000. The other one can do 2,000. And it just grows linearly. And there might be 100,000 nodes in the Skale network supporting all the different applications out there. And each 16 nodes adds another 2,000 transactions per second to the network. So it can grow linearly. And then you still can use the value and security of the mainnet. And when you leave, your clones get burned or destroyed. And maybe you only have 4 at that point, or you have 40, but it goes back to the Ethereum mainnet. You get what you should have, and then you take it back. And you as a user don't even need to know you use the Skale chain. You just use Ethereum, and then the developer on the back end has this handshake to the scaling platform, and it's fast and easy, and they don't need to, we end users shouldn't need to know about backend systems. Just use applications, right? And keep money secure.
Funny, I can see why your high school friends would probably be like, "You're doing what now?" When I heard your college like teammates, how'd you get into this? Because it's when you start to lay it out there, it obviously, it's pretty complex. You're really talking about the future of the way that money moves, the way that transactions happen. It's pretty intense. So, what kind of companies come to you? What are your clients like? You don't have to necessarily go into specifics, but who are you basically servicing with this?
Yeah. So right now, Ethereum is where all the developer traction's happening.
Always.
I bet 99% of the developer traction, people building dApps are building it on Ethereum. And so usually right now, these are like, 5 to 50 person startups that see an opportunity to say, hey, let's go build, let's use community and decentralization. Decentralization is not a good word because it's loaded. I like to say, let's grow market share by having better profit sharing and better community governance and community control of this product.
Right.
And that's what blockchains do. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go compete with a competitor to say, pricing's better, control's better, ownership of your data is better. All these things are better. You get, a say. It's like a democratized business. And you even see businesses that are centralized doing this, like Reddit's doing it, but just with a couple subreddits. And they're saying, hey, we're going to give up control of these subreddits, right? The crypto subreddits, we're going to have this Ethereum token. And you know what? The group is in charge of these things. Reddit, the company, is not going to manage these things, the token and the token governance, and they're giving up control for growth. And so we'll see big companies take hybrid models. And then smaller companies are saying, hey, I see these big companies that are middlemen that are taking, like Uber, for example, which is a tough one to execute on. I bet no one will do it well for 3 to 5 years. But Uber takes 30% of every ride.
Right.
What if the community ran the software and there was a stable token introduced in the middle that had like a maker type feature on the back end that gave people, some upside by participating, holding the base token? And the fees are always paid in the growth token, and the stable coin, the US dollar backed stable coins used to pay for the ride. The community runs the servers and the code, and all of a sudden drivers get paid 20% more and riders paid 10% less, or each get a 15% of Uber's cut. And what are people going to use? And hey, we want these rights for drivers. Well, let's vote. It's not like the Uber execs. It's
like a real union. It's the spirit of what a union should be, right? Is that everybody,
but with better control, unions had issues because
in theory, without the leadership and without the politics.
Yeah. And it's like everyone could sit at home and like punch in their votes when they're staked, and you don't have to have like a union leader, pushing you around to control your vote. Not that unions are bad, but just they. Yeah, no.
I meant the spirit of it, not in practice by any stretch. So we've seen, at this point, probably thousands of these projects, right? Especially since 2016, 2017, their coins are trading all over the place. What do you think happens to all these? A lot of them are already zombie projects, probably, even though their coins are being traded and stuff. Do you think that we see this huge expansion of the net and we do see thousands and thousands of successful, or do you think that there's just going to be a few that sort of the cream rises to the top and are successful?
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot. My guess is it's going to be a lot like the 99 bubble, which I was graduating, I was starting college in 2000. So I was not privy to all the details of what happened, but, was able to observe it and then retroactively study it. And hey, there's just so many things that pop up, and there's people trying to get quick money, and whether they're teams and projects or investors, everyone's trying to, but now we're at a point where I think traction is king, and the only projects that will survive are ones that have real traction. And the speculation part of this is starting to die. So I do think we're going to have a delayering. I think 80% of projects and coins and you see like these ghost coins, ghost networks, and Evan Van Ness is somebody who posts all the ghost network stuff on Twitter. He's always like calling out different chains and like, look, there are no transactions for the last 20 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And they have $1 billion valuations and no one uses these things. So that stuff's going to die. And then, but you know what, and there'll be a delayering, 20% will be here, but then I think there might be know, 10 times as many projects and teams and businesses, because once we kind of have that, like that shakeout, because I think the industry is going to grow dramatically.
Right. We're early.
Quality, we're going to look for metrics. People that buy tokens get smarter about what metrics to look at. Like, and you can go on GitHub and just see, like, is the team doing anything?
Yeah.
You don't need to be an engineer. Just go on GitHub, look at the GitHub repositories. Yeah. And you can see the activity that happens. There's an activity gauge, and it's like, are people working on this? How many people contribute? How many people work on this? And if something has like $100 million total diluted valuation and they haven't changed the code in 6 months, like, run the other direction.
So somewhat like the Pareto principle, 80-20, 20% will be successful, 80% will fail, and 80% of the success will come from those 20%. That's interesting. So we all kind of, and you were building during this ICO bubble, I guess, in 2017. Mm-hmm. Some have already compared, 2017, I guess, to 1999, the sort of crash at that point.
Yeah.
How much do you think it hurt the idea of mainstream adoption? I guess we can talk about what we think the path to mainstream adoption is in general, but how much damage do you think like that insane sort of bubble popping and, I mean, companies, as you said, raising $1 billion when they probably needed like a few $1 million to build a product and then never building it. I mean, how does that affect, I guess, public perception and the idea of mainstream adoption going forward? Do you think that it did irreparable damage, or do you think that, we can heal from that?
No, I don't think it did irreparable damage. I think what it did, it drove a lot of awareness, but then a lot of people got burned. The people who found out late and started buying late and started getting pumps and putting more money in, they got crushed. Yeah. And they lost a lot of real money. And so I think what we have now is we have a lot of people who should be really concerned and should be looking for real signals of growth. But I think the market, and they should be looking for maturity in how projects launch if they're launching. So I'll give you some examples, some things that Scale's doing that I was really just, unmoving and about, like, and just passionate about is one. What happened back then too is you had people who VCs bought early discounts, and they got like half the price of other, people who bought in like a public sale, which was, maybe 1/100th the price of other people after like the token started pumping. And then they had no lockups. And then you look at the teams, and the teams had no lockups.
Just dumping.
And so what you do is you create this dynamic where people just dump on the retail market or secondary market coming in. And that just motivation to keep building and doing stuff kind of goes away. And then they go find the next one to do that same kind of mechanism with. So what we're doing, we have our team vesting schedules don't start until the mainnet launches. And our investors' lockup schedules don't start till the mainnet launches. That means me, I've been working for 2.5 years. Right. I haven't invested a single day. But, we do that to protect people that want to participate in the network. Because in Scale, too, you're not buying a security. You're actually buying a token that can be used. And so when utility. We sell the token, and so when people buy the token, I guess we're not going to sell it. Consensus is going to launch a proof of use mechanism launch where you can buy a token from them through this Dutch auction process, but then you have to stake it in the network, and there's no trading for 90 days. There's 90 days where the network gets healthy, the validator set up the nodes, people join the network, and they stake, and then 90 days later it goes on exchanges, but you still have these lockup periods, and you sold tokens, and it ends up becoming I think a much more fair way for everybody to be able to buy without getting screwed over by people. And it's more compliant, and it makes it really clear that the token's a utility. And then, hey, the other thing is we have 45 dApps signed up to use the product, and 30 top world-class validators to run the network. And you have to build that stuff before you want to take people's money and let them bet on you. You know what I mean? Because it's just, it's slower success, but more ethically, I think, in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, there's an existing model for this, right? I mean, employees of companies get stock options, or then they vest at a certain pace. They don't give a first week employee all of their options for the next 10 years so they can go sell the stock and have no vested interest. So, I mean, it is crazy what a Wild West, I guess, that phase was, and how insane those models were. I mean, you could tell at the time, but looking back, I guess, how difficult has it been navigating the, I guess, ever-changing landscape of regulation operating in the United States? Don't be a part of the 7.1 million Bitcoiners in the United States who have Bitcoin and a retirement account, but don't have Bitcoin in their retirement account. Seriously, you can hold Bitcoin in your retirement account and not just GBTC. How can you do this? Through a self-directed Choice IRA by Kingdom Trust. The first 1,000 users to open a Choice IRA will receive $62.50 in free Bitcoin. Visit retirewithchoice.com/wolf. That's retirewithchoice.com/WOLF. Podcast listeners receive extra points to move up the waitlist and get their Choice IRA first. Do it right now. It's time to take control of your financial future and free yourself from the restrictions of classic retirement accounts.
Are you sick of paying ridiculous fees to trade crypto? It's time you try Voyager. It's hands down my favorite place to buy and trade crypto, and it's 100% commission free. Voyager gives you easy access to more than 30 top crypto assets, and you can instantly transfer cash from your bank account so you never miss a trading opportunity. Even better, you can now automatically earn interest on your crypto holdings. Currently, they're offering 5% interest on Bitcoin and 6% on USDC. Yes, you heard that correctly, 6%. And there are no limits or lockups, which means your funds always stay liquid. Find out why so many people are making the switch to Voyager. Visit investvoyager.com or search for Voyager on the iTunes or Google Play Store and get $25 in free Bitcoin when you use the promo code SCOTT25. That's investvoyager.com, promo code SCOTT25 for $25 in free Bitcoin and start trading today.
Because you've touched on securities versus utility tokens, and there's always this like putting it to the Howey test and deciding, is it a security? Are we violating any FinCEN, all those things. So.
Well, we did. So Scale Labs Inc. was working on this. We raised an initial SAFT round, and then we decided hey, this should be community owned. And what we did is we essentially gave the assets to a foundation in Liechtenstein. And the SAFs went to them, and then Scale Labs just supports that the foundation as a service provider. And we, do engineering. We help do sales and marketing and network and community growth and support and things of that nature. And then in Liechtenstein, there's a clear blockchain act with clear governance and rules around what constitutes a utility token, what things you need to do for due diligence, what KYC AML processes you have to follow, and so in Liechtenstein, that entity then launches a token. And then what's also happening is Consensus has a really cool program called Activate. So if you go to Consensus Activate or read about the Brooklyn project, and so they approached the foundation and they said, and the Anstalt of the foundation, which is the kind of the business arm, and with this model, and the token's going to launch that way. It happens to also be compliant to the, from my perspective, to the greatest degree possible for U.S. understanding of what defines utility,
right,
or a security, and so it complies with U.S. laws, but it's this other entity is doing it because they have a clear legal framework, and in the U.S. it's not. There's certain things that are really clearly violations, and you need to make sure you don't do those. But this way, the entity can launch. But let me tell you, it takes an entirely new level of effort. It's like usually when you start a business, you just build a product and you sell it to people.
Yep.
And in crypto, you build a product and you let other people run the product. Other people buy it. They sell it to each other, and then. And then you have this whole legal framework thing that frankly is a huge time and money sink because it's a new battle in itself. But I think we've been lucky to have really phenomenal lawyers and then this entity in Liechtenstein that's been able to help offload that.
Do you think that the United States is extremely far behind with, I guess, embracing and understanding the importance of blockchain? And crypto in general, but I guess really the underlying technology, and making it so difficult seems to be in my eyes, to the detriment of the United States, because other countries are getting ahead. And if we believe this is the future, I mean, do you think that the United States is really far behind here?
I actually have to say a little bit, yes, but also this is what I think what our governing bodies are trying to do are protect consumers. And so the SEC, I'm really supportive of. And so if you think about what they're trying to do, like my grandma's 92 and she gets called by people trying to get her to buy stuff. And
of course, it's so sad. And so you have, and if you think about a lot of crypto tokens, like they didn't have a product built yet. It's like supposedly decentralized, but it doesn't exist. And you have this token and you have all, these advisors and it does all this stuff, but a lot of it's like not real. And then you're trying to get people who don't have the understanding to go and, analyze to say, hey, this is real. This is a good investment. And so the SEC basically says, they have a framework now and it says, don't sell a token unless the network already exists and is running. Right. And it doesn't require, and if you're decentralized, it means you're not, requiring people to continue to do work before the thing, can function in a decentralized manner. And so they issued a framework that made a lot of sense to me, but it's also like you don't want to perpetuate income inequality where only accredited investors can make dumb bets, because then talk about this all the time.
Your normal person can't invest in start. And so the consensus thing is cool, or like the proof of use thing, because you don't have to be accredited to buy. But you have to take a test that shows you have basic blockchain knowledge.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so if my grandma took it, she would never pass it. She's 92. She doesn't know anything about technology or blockchain, even though she knows how to use FaceTime now, which is cool. But anybody who invests in these things, who knows enough about blockchain and has skimmed the white paper, they're gonna qualify. So things like that, I think, help keep fairness and protection in good balance.
Right. So there's basically a happy balance that we're trying to achieve, I guess. This conversation, that conversation comes up so often when I talk to the CEO of any company in this space, is the idea, I guess, of accreditation, and obviously like that balance between trying to protect people, but also saying that if you don't make $250,000 a year or whatever, you're not allowed to invest your money as you see fit, or, speculate on things that you may really believe in. It really is a hard battle there, because, and during that ICO bubble, it probably did in retrospect save a lot of Americans from making some pretty terrible investments, because, we were locked out. Yeah. So maybe that's the silver lining. When I think about the United States being somewhat behind, I'm a trader, by trade. Trader by trade. And so it's the tax code is what is so difficult for me. It seems like we're so behind. Like, the fact that you can't spend crypto without it being a taxable sale of an asset, and having to worry about, if I buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks with Bitcoin, that I've now sold Bitcoin and have to somehow account for that. I think those are huge barriers to entry for mainstream adoption in this country. I don't know.
I totally agree, because tokens aren't a real token like Bitcoin, or with a Skale token after it launches, like Ethereum, ERC 20, all these token standards, like ETH itself, they are functional units of software that do things, and but also they're meant to be programmable money. And if I want to use them for money and I have to pay 40% short-term tax, like what a mess, right?
Yeah, you just won't.
And the other thing is staking is also kind of like a complete gray area right now. So let's say I stake in a network and I get bounty returned to me, and I just want to keep restaking that. And I want to keep restaking that. Why should I pay 40% each time I get paid?
Right.
When I'm not spending it, it's just compounding. And it's kind of like, if you're an apple farmer and you take 10% of your apples and you just like eat them and use them for seeds and replant them, should you have to pay? You don't pay tax on that quantity. You only pay tax when you take them to the market and sell them and exchange them for cash. So
it's an amazing analogy. Yeah. Amazing analogy.
So we need reform. I would love to see, and the thing is, the securities law and the tax law seem to be, like each taking the most favorable stance for the entity, and they're diametrically opposed. And like, hold on, if I take that logic here, then that doesn't make sense. And the logics don't match up. If there were one logic around what a token was, and that, the US, like we as like all being US citizens could say, hey, like this is what a token is. And then we match the securities and the tax laws to that. I think we're in a better position. And the SEC framework is a great, I think, step in the right direction. And I hope the tax law also, keeps evolving as well.
Yeah. It seems like it would be, first of all, I mean, we both all know that the IRS is like woefully underfunded and undermanned anyway. So they're not going to go out and probably track most of this for people. They're just creating more work. But it seems that logically, it would just be kind of like you said, your cash goes into the crypto market. Whatever you do with it within that market is fine. And when you cash out, you pay the taxes on the difference. I mean, it would be so simple, kind of like how Forex, I guess, is taxed when you trade currencies. I buy Bitcoin, I go trade it for all these other things, I spend it. And when I cash that Bitcoin out, I pay, I make $100,000, I pay taxes on that.
Yeah.
It
or if I buy something, if I go trade it for a good, I buy a car, like I pay sales tax on the car.
You're already paying the tax. It's a double taxing. And if you want to trade altcoins, you get taxed. You're selling Bitcoin when you buy it. Now you're selling that when you come back. I mean, it's like you get 5 taxable transactions out of one simple thing. And it just makes absolutely no sense. It's somewhat infuriating, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So,
anyways, I think there's good stuff on the horizon. I hope, but I just kind of take this strategy like, hey, just pay taxes and just keep our fingers crossed. Let's make sure
you don't want to be the test case. That's for sure.
Yeah. Let's lobby. We need a lobbying group that educates the government lawmakers on what crypto is. I think it's not, we talk, like we were talking about earlier, it brings more democratization to businesses. It helps data ownership. It helps the rights of consumers that use products. It helps people who participate in work for these like entities have better rights and better pay. And there's also an appreciation of these assets. But this is like such a net positive for society that I think, we need to make sure the US doesn't get too far behind.
So you talked about earlier, it's interesting. You talked about obviously exiting a company for $500 million, but that it basically had to raise $250 million to do that. How does venture capital play a role, I guess, in crypto? Are there unique challenges to raising money in this space that are different from the other space? I don't think a lot of people realize how brutalized, obviously, the owners of the companies who start a company or the inventor of a product before it, all the VC and the sharks kind of come in, how little they often benefit at the end. Are there unique challenges in crypto to raising money to start these products? Start these companies?
Yeah, you know what? I think the framework in crypto is so much better than traditional startups. I mean, so many companies, you look at founders that start companies, and because of the nature of dilution with equity, you keep growing the pie and growing the pie and growing the pie. And you might have 50% of the company as a founder, and then over time you might have like 5% or 2% or 1% or 0.5%.
Not a percent.
And the company sells for like 700 million and you hardly make any money because of the nature of the way investing works in the venture capital industry. And it's all about like making sure your valuation goes up and you raise as little money as you need, as little money as possible, and do the most with it and raise it at the highest valuation. And you protect your ownership stake. But sometimes that doesn't happen, and you have employees, you need to keep them, paid, and you need to take a down round to keep the company going. So things like that happen too. But the cool thing about crypto is investors play a role. They often stake in the networks and they secure the network. So they're like supporters. They're not, they are actually actively playing a role with security. And, there's very clear rules. These things aren't, like there's a framework of who owns what. And just like for the users and like the people who run servers, the money doesn't go, there's not a middleman in most of these crypto economic mechanisms and designs. You're really growing community by bringing value to the users. And then as a team, hey, you only have a fixed pool that you have and then you can sell. You can't print more tokens, right? And Bitcoin's like, hey, we only have a certain amount of Bitcoin. There's only a certain amount of scale. And so you have to like be really smart with the way you spend the money and how you raise it. And we've been doing that. We've just been acting like we've raised decent money, but we're $17 million roughly has been raised, but we're spending money like we've got 2 million because that's the way you have to act. You have to, that's what makes startups successful. So, but hey, raising money in the space, it's similar thing. Like investors or people that are looking to invest money, they're looking for good deals. They want to know if you have product market fit. They want to understand how you're going to use the money. What are the dynamics at play? And in crypto, it's also unique because you really, these things aren't securities. So you have to really be talking about the functional use of all and how their role and their participation brings more strength, security, growth to the network as well.
So you just said you're not going to print more Bitcoin. We can't print more scale. They're obviously deflationary assets. So what do you think about what the Fed is doing right now with infinite quantitative easing and printing, quote unquote, as much money as we're going to need to make sure that everything continues to function?
Yeah, I mean, all I have to say is it's like I'm observing. I don't have all the right answers other than I'm cringing. And I think it's a really complex topic. And, my understanding too is that the world pays the price because that's who we owe debt to. So It's like, if I owe you $100 and then we just make a dollar really worth 50 cents, you just print, a bunch more, then what I own, my peg to real world value, I'm like, hold on, you owe me this. And now you just printed more. And so the other countries who the U.S. has debt to maybe are the ones that pay more of the price. That's why I keep hearing the U.S. and the dollar will remain strong despite what's happening.
Yeah.
But I don't have the answers here. I just kind of am like cringing, but also hoping that the funds help people as people are not being able to work. That's the hard part to me.
So, you said you were first reading the Bitcoin white paper in, 2012, 2013. Isn't this sort of the environment this was created for? Do you think that people are starting to see, kind of a crack in the foundation of how the general economy works, and maybe that this is the time that Bitcoin could shine?
Definitely. And hey, I am, it's funny, there's like Bitcoin maximalists and then, people who are all about Ethereum. And I think actually a lot of people on the Ethereum side, like myself, we love Bitcoin and we all got started with Bitcoin and Bitcoin, gold's worth $9 trillion or something. And most of it just sits under storage somewhere and it's hard to access. Bitcoin to me is a phenomenal store of value and a peg to stable currencies. And I don't know, I actually in the short term don't get excited about paying for coffee with my Bitcoin. I get excited about it being a phenomenal place to store value and be leveraged against for DeFi primitives. And so it is just getting started. My philosophy has always been never sell Bitcoin, just keep buying more.
Yeah, I kind of the same.
Not investment advice, by the way.
No, but my dad's probably listening and would tell me that was nuts. So, I think that, I do think that it's getting to a point with general awareness where there are people who understand that what's happening is crazy, and maybe they will start buying 1%, the Chamath, everybody should own 1% of their net worth should be in Bitcoin in case we go full Mad Max and the entire world melts down, I guess. But you kind of like insurance, you want to have it, but you don't necessarily want to have to use it,
and it's really this amazing thing that we all own together. That's where I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say, are we all going to collectively own the search engine we use someday?
Right.
We collectively are saying, you know what? We don't need to trust anybody because of the game theory at play within the way Bitcoin functions. It serves all of us to not, to keep it running. And for our search engines, Google makes $110 billion a year in revenue. Why are we not going to switch over to a model where we collectively own the search engine and
Like
have better
Brave.
rules and governance.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Brave is a really cool company that at least is like taking steps in that direction. I mean, yeah,
Yep.
I think that will happen. I do. I want to go back to football a little bit because I've never had the opportunity on the show to talk to anybody about, well, because I'm always fascinated with the arguments about concussions and CTE. I mean, did you have personal experience with that? Do you think that it's a big problem in football? It's fun. Literally, like, I grew up in Gainesville, and my neighbors were all like Gator football players, Gator announcers. They've been through the whole thing. And I remember him always being like, that's whatever, man. Look at me. I'm good. I got concussions, and kind of that attitude. But it seems like there's something there.
I think I had like 5 or 6 concussions.
There you go.
And one of them I was, so it was at Texas Stadium, or like Darrell K. Royal Stadium, playing against the Longhorns, and kick return. And one of my teammates missed the Texas guy and just spearheaded me right in the side of the head. And this guy, he went on to play for the Eagles. He was a great player and like strong guy. And I just remember just looking up and like, where am I? And looking around, and there's like 100,000 people around me. And I was like, oh my God, I'm playing a football stadium. And I ran to the sideline, and all of a sudden I could remember the dream I had the night before. I was like in this like weird, but I was competing for a spot and playing time, and so I just didn't tell anyone I got a concussion. Just played, you get physically ill, you're like sick, but I just went out and kept playing. But I had my share of concussions, and thankfully I have not had any issues. And I know I have some teammates that are like, hey, do you ever like feel, kind of off? And thankfully I feel fortunate. I have no issues later, but hey, or down the road, I think the answer is we need to move back to leather helmets.
Yeah, because then people aren't going to spear each other. It's kind of the opposite, right? It's like, who's going to throw their head in there if they're not protected?
Yeah, because your helmet is a weapon. I mean, and if you don't use it, you're going to, it's a disadvantage. You have to use it. And so right now, like all these flags and these things that are happening, it's just like, I just think it's like let people play, and like let's just change the equipment, because it's less of a protective device and it's become more of an offensive device. And I played rugby.
I've never heard it explained that way. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I played on the rugby team after college, and let me tell you, rugby is like running and wrestling. There's no hard impact because you just can't ram your head into people. Right. And so there's just so far fewer. I mean, it may be like the front line, those guys are banging heads, but the number of concussions is so much lower, and it's so much better in your body. People play rugby recreationally until they're like 50. Yeah. In a lot of countries that play rugby.
Might get your ear like ripped off a little bit or something, but
at
least you don't have the long-term damage of concussions. I mean, do you think that they're going to be able to have a college pro football season this year?
I hope so. I really do. I think I love what the NBA is doing, how they're trying to they're like, hey, let's like create this hermetically sealed environment so we can still play and get television going. But, in terms of fans being in the stands, I just don't think it's going to happen.
No. And if it does, it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah. And, we're not seeing, like, if you're looking at all the health.org, we're seeing an uptrend estimate in the fall and winter. And I think we're just going to be in a tough place till we get a vaccine. But hey, I just hope, I don't know. I really hope I'm already like, dealing with everyone else is dealing with. Like, I'm tired of being at home and not having any sports on. Like, I'd love to be able to watch football this fall.
Yeah, I mean, we all have kind of upset. It gives us all something to do. I mean, it's like I moved back to Gainesville a couple of years ago after living in New York City, Philly, and Miami for like 22 years. And so it's the only thing here, right? So like we tailgate right at the front of the stadium, like right on Gator Walk with like and if that's gone, it's like our entire like social life. You know how these towns are. It's eliminated entire year. But it's interesting you talk about the NBA coming to Florida in this hermetically sealed environment. I think it's like this incredible idea in principle, but I can't see these guys like remaining in their hotel room, like celibate for 6 months, like not going out to find weed. You know what I mean? Like unless they're going to be really locked in security, I feel like it's going to end up being this just sort of like Olympic Village, free for all.
Yeah. I mean, and hopefully they do get to have a life, and they just get to test them every, but hey, like they've got to have fun and live.
Yeah. You have to,
hey, just like test everybody once a week. And if you're tested, you're like out for 2 weeks till you're back or something. And, but yeah, it's a lot easier in theory than practice. That's for sure.
And you did an Ironman, right?
Yeah. So you're one of those. Well, no. Let me tell you, I'd never done a triathlon. I did a triathlon when I was like, I think I was like 8 years old, and I did a sprint with my dad.
Yeah.
And then I didn't do another one ever. And I wasn't about distance sports at all. And I was in Japan, and one of my customers always kept trying to talk me into doing an Ironman. And his whole thing is like, it's a whole hog approach. Your first triathlon, you just do a full Ironman. Because if you do a half Ironman or something else, then you're never going to want to do the Ironman.
Right. It'll be so bad, right? You'll suffer so much that you never want to do it.
He's like, just go all the way in. And then we're out drinking. We're in Tokyo. It's like 2 a.m. I'm like, I'm doing the Ironman. And everyone's like toasting, cheer, committed. And then the next day I woke up and I was like, oh shit, what did I do?
Yeah.
And so then, I had 4 months, and I went and bought a bike. I learned how to I could only swim 2 laps without needing to get air. And I just hacked the techniques. I was just watching YouTube videos, and I just tried to perfect my swim technique and my cycling technique and my nutrition and my running technique. And I got a physical therapist on day 1. And I started doing all these prehabilitation things, and I did it. I completed it. It took 15 hours.
Yeah,
it was painful, but
it took me 15 days.
That was my
But I mean, most people train for a lot longer than 4 months, I would imagine, right? And you don't go, I mean, you laugh about it, but most people who do Ironman have done 10, 20 triathlons and have sort of scaled up, I would imagine. I mean, it just seems, I don't think there's anything for me, and I've been an athlete my whole life. Nothing worse than even just running a marathon, much less adding all the other parts of an Ironman onto it. I mean, it just
I never run a marathon either.
I hate running. I hate it. I hate it. I love sprinting. I'll run from here to somewhere for a practical purpose, but I think it's there's something
about the whole hog approach, doing the full Ironman. It's just such a crazy goal that you just are driven to action. It's I need to focus to make this happen. I need to build a plan. And it's I think it's almost easier than doing training for 10 years to do an Ironman.
Right.
If I could go back and tell myself though, I would have trained 20% more, because I was miserable. It was horrible.
I mean, it seems just horrible.
it was so painful.
Would you ever do it again? Or was it one of those things where you were I've done it. I'm never doing any triathlon. I'm never running further than my couch to my kitchen again. This is over.
You know what? So I was on a bike, and I was on the bikes, and a monsoon hit, and I was just wearing this singlet, and I wasn't keeping up with the Japanese news, and I didn't didn't realize that this typhoon or monsoon had changed directions. And so I didn't have a jacket. I didn't have any warm clothes. And all of a sudden it just starts raining sideways, and it gets 50 degrees. And I was 8 hours on a bike, and I was just crying, just getting hit in the face with rain and wind. And I just remember, and I was like, you know what? I want to write a letter to myself right now and tell myself, never, ever, ever do an Ironman ever again.
Yeah.
Because I just know, I knew that when you cross the finish line, you just get hit with such a high. You're that's what happens to people. Then they keep doing them. And now I'm kind of thinking,
I don't care. I don't know what kind of high.
Maybe I'll do another one. I'm thinking about it again. And I'm I'll get back in really good shape, and I'll just. And so I'm starting to think, I wish I had that letter right now, so I could have told myself how horrible it is. That's
the horrible ex-girlfriend who was the worst thing ever. And then 5 years later, you're oh, she wasn't that bad. And you start remembering only the good stuff and not the bad stuff. That's also why they say that people have a second, third, fourth kid, is because you forget, your brain erases how awful it was having a baby. And they're oh, it was fine. But at the time it was absolutely terrible. So do you ever get to play football anymore? I mean, do you miss the game? It's not like tennis or golf, which you can go out and play for the rest of your life. You can't just go play football by yourself, right? So
yeah, that's the saddest thing about football. I think anybody listening who played in high school, college, or whenever you play your last game, it's really sad, because you're never going to put the equipment on again.
ever.
Like hardly any. Yeah, you're just done. And, you can go. So I love going and throwing the football around and just like running around, but you don't ever get to really play. So it's, it's kind of a sad thing.
Did you ever think that you would go play, I mean, whether in the NFL or professionally somewhere else, or did you always sort of know that college was going to be the end of your football career?
So I started my junior year and I thought hey, I could do it. And, I just had a really bad injury. And
same story for everyone.
I remember I remember just being by myself, going on this walk and saying, you know what, I'm not going to be able, my dream's over. I've got to find a new one. And then I was like, I'm going to move to Silicon Valley and I've got another goal. And I shifted my goal.
So you were able to fully, everyone, when sadly Kobe passed away, I think one of the major focuses was like, this guy has this incredible second act that we're all missing, right? Like he had this, this basketball career is incredible, but now he's a venture capitalist and a business owner, and he's, succeeding in the same manner outside of sports that he did before. I don't feel like most athletes get there, like mentally. I think there's this, I know coming from music and stuff and having a certain level of like success, you definitely miss the attention and you miss the game or whatever, but like, I guess it's just a rare person that can make the transition and go as hard or as big at something completely different after focusing their whole life on that one thing. How did you say to yourself, yeah, okay, football's done, here we go? You know what I mean? I did it with music into crypto and it's been great, but it's a very hard thing to do.
Yeah, it's really hard. I think, you have to set your North Star and just really emotionally say, all right, and it's hard because your identity is wrapped up in this other thing. The lifestyle you have is different. And I just said, hey, I'm going to go do this. And I'll tell you, it wasn't easy because in college, playing at Nebraska, right? And if you're starting football, I can't even
imagine, man.
It's a really good lifestyle.
You're God. You're God.
You did well. And so I took a job for this tech company and leave Lincoln, bye everybody, being kind of a well-known person and having this awesome life. And then I moved, then this company in Silicon Valley hired me and they said, hey, you have to move to North Carolina and work there for 3 to 6 months. And then we'll move you to California if you do well. And so I'm in North Carolina. I'm every day sitting in a cubicle, cold calling people who are hanging up on me, calling IT directors and CIOs. And I'd go out to bars and they're like, oh, you aren't from here. It was and I just thought to myself, I was oh my God, I'm a total loser compared to what I was before. Yeah. And I have no friends. I'm go to work every day and sit in a cubicle. And then, I just kind of was hey, I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to and I just pushed through, but it wasn't easy, but you just have to have your, vision of where you want to go and then figure out how do I get there? What do I need to do? And you probably went through something similar, right? When you were switching gears?
To some degree, yeah, but I was already approaching 40. I'm 43 years old. And so I didn't really quit DJing until I was 38 or 39, even though it was a kind of a slow transition and it was forced to some degree by having kids and, off the road. But yeah, I went through it. And even at that age, it's it's hard not to be cool anymore. You know what I mean? At that basic level, it's hard to admit that, but it's like you said, if I went out in the cities where I lived, I knew everyone, I could walk into any place, high five, and then it was you're a crypto trader.
Yeah. Well, you're doing crypto now. Hey, you're doing crypto now, which is very cool.
It's cool. No, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying it is very strange.
It's a transition.
Gears, but I think I'm like you, where I would just push through it and be confident. Just not the kind to sit around and wait for something to happen. Okay, that's it. Let's go on and do the next thing. But I just wonder for a lot of athletes who get to that level, how hard that must be, especially football, where your career's over in your late 20s for most people. And what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
And, hey, I had to I tell you, it was rewarding though. But I was glad I went through that pain for those years, just kind of completely ripping the Band-Aid off. And I'd go back to Lincoln. I went back to Lincoln. When I moved to California, when I got the promotion, drove back across the country, went back to Lincoln on the way back and hung out with my friends, and they're still living the same lifestyle. I was you guys, and I was you know what? I'm investing in the future. And some of them, I go back and they're, I don't want to comment on where any of them are, but Some of them, I'm sure, like I was like, and then I was like, a couple years later, hey, getting to hang out every week. I was in New York or Tokyo or San Francisco. I was working really, really hard, but I was, had like a new fun reinvention of myself and what life was. And now that I'm working in crypto, I have to say it's like another level of like intellectual stimulation and fun.
I agree.
And I'm loving it too, because I was, in enterprise software purely. It was deep tech, but this is deep tech, but there's other interesting things here, and it's a fun place to be.
Well, really impressive, man. I love your story, and I think hopefully some people find some inspiration there, because I know that a lot of people find it hard to really find that next act, as we said. So where can people keep up with you after this? Where can people follow what Skale is doing?
Yeah, so Twitter is you can follow me at Jack O'Holleran. You can also go at Skale Network is the Skale Network Twitter. And then if you go to scale.network, scale with a K, that's the website, and you can guide you to all these links.
We can see it on your shirt, at least for the people who decide to watch.
It's my Denver Hackathon shirt, by the way. I've got my Buffacorn for anybody who knows the Buffacorn.
That's awesome. I actually didn't even notice that the whole time. I just saw the Scale part. Well, Ben, thank you.
It's the mascot of the ETH Denver Hackathon.
Okay, well, I'm sure there's a few people who recognize it. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Before we go, if the Huskers ever play Florida in Gainesville, I'm coming to visit you, all right?
Oh, I'm telling you, we've got like the tailgate of all tailgates, like with the air conditioned tent and the screens and catered everything right at the front. We do it big, so you're invited anytime. But we might have to meet in Lincoln too. I don't know. I can't guarantee it'll be.
Yeah, hey, all right. Let's do it.
And I've never made that trip, so I would love to do that. All right, man. Well, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to what you guys have coming in the future.
All right, thank you. Been a pleasure.
Let's go.